everybody. It's me, Johnny, and with me, I've got DJD.
And Craig.
Well, and Craig, yes, of course. Back there in the booth, we've got Craig, but there is a silence there because the one who was the most consistent, allegedly, self-proclaimed most consistent Navcast host, Farmer, is not here.
Weird how that works out. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy, right? He also messaged us like 20 minutes before we started saying he's not coming. In true Farmer fashion.
I
want to bring up that Farmer has missed like almost a whole season at this point, right? Like 10
yeah,
episodes
he's actually
season.
pretty close. Yeah.
He's pretty close to having missed a whole season, and I've missed 2 episodes. David has missed 1 episode. And no. I've missed 3. I've missed 3 episodes, excuse me. Let me amend that. I also missed that one where you interviewed Craig.
Oh, true. Yeah.
I've missed 3 episodes. Farmer, but yet somehow we're the inconsistent ones, right? Somehow we're the ones that we don't care about the podcast anymore. So, right before we started, David and I were chatting, and this is not something we so this podcast is a video games podcast, kind of. I mean, I feel like it's more like a current events podcast. I would line it up there because we tend to talk about like whatever is happening now.
Like kind of pop culture-y. Yeah.
Whatever's happening now for us.
In entertainment, yeah.
Not necessarily
us, yeah.
The world.
True. Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
For us. And so like for me, what I want to talk about is the very new game that is World of Warcraft. Which I just hit max level in on my main. Just want to throw that out there.
I just think it's so nice of Microsoft to support such a little indie dev, like Blizzard.
Yeah. Exactly. Their cutscenes are really good. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Their cutscenes are actually very good. I know I'm not the only person who has said this, but like I would really love to. Maybe they don't like it or they don't care to do it, but like, why does their cutscene team not make a feature length movie?
Right? Exactly. Like, I mean, even their Overwatch stuff is really good, but like,
it's very beautiful.
Well, like that's kind of why I was so excited about like when Overwatch 2 got announced or whatever, and one of the big things was that it was going to have a single player campaign. I'm like, hey, with this team and with these characters that they have backstories for but aren't ever shown in a game, and the cutscenes that they could do, like this would be a really cool like freaking narrative project. And then they opted not to do that.
I just learned that apparently they had they have a single player campaign in Overwatch 2.
They were going to. They were going to do like maybe not single player, maybe it would have been I think it was PvE, I think is what they were going to do. I don't remember whether it was going to be single player or co-op. But yeah. That was the plan. That was part of the reason. That was part of the justification for making an Overwatch 2 instead of just continuing to update 1. Was like, oh, we're gonna add a whole bunch of stuff to it, like a PvE experience and all that, a story mode.
And then they were like, you know what? We're not gonna do that.
Yeah,
actually,
yeah. That was my biggest disappointment with that. Yeah, but now they're bringing 6v6 back, so I mean, like they reinvented the wheel. Congrats to them.
they Apple it. I recently saw Apple has released like a new Mac Mini, and the power button is on the bottom. And like people are so mad about it because like this, the mouse, their magic mouse, like the charging ports on the button, people are so mad about it. It's just like, surprise to our listeners, I've been on Threads again, and
oh no,
not happy, just really not happy about it, dude. I've seen multiple it's just people being mad about stuff that it's like just don't buy it. You know what I mean? Just don't buy it. If you don't want a computer with a power button, like this is gonna sound funny. So right now, I'm using an M2 Mac Mini, okay? It's a decent computer. The power button is on the back of it right now, in the back corner. for me to reach, and my computer is like underneath this, like, you know, I don't know what these things are called, but you know, like how on a desk you have like a little stand that a monitor goes on, and then there's like storage underneath the monitor. You know what I'm talking about? I'm under one of those, right?
Sure.
And so in order for me to reach back behind it and hit the power button, I literally pick it up, actually. Like you know what I mean? Like when I reach behind it, because it's so small, I just end up picking up the whole thing and pushing the power button. Who cares? Also, D, you and we've talked, I don't know that we've talked about this on the podcast, but we've talked about, I read this whole terrible take, and this is going to get everyone to stop listening to this podcast, that video games are too expensive for $70. And that there are no AAA games that came out this year or last year.
That's insane. That is
that are
wild.
Worth $70. But the thing, so first off, that's just like egregiously wrong.
Yep.
Right. And then like if you adjust for inflation, which I can't believe we're doing, like a $60 game in the 2010s is worth more than $70 now. Right.
Yes.
A $60 game in the 20aughts still worth it's like what, maybe close to $100 even, 90 something dollars. I don't know what the inflation rate actually is. But like $70 for a game now is not as much as $60 for a game 15 years ago. For sure. So not only is that just wrong, but then also they were like, also video games are easier to make now, so it should be cheaper. And it's like, what are you talking about? They're easier to make. Like, if anything, games are just getting more intense and costing more money to make.
Right.
So there's that. And then third, this is my personal favorite, because I looked at it because I was going to be like, well, Baldur's Gate 3 is clearly a $70 game that's worth $70, right? Every game that the people commented, like people commenting to this person, what about this game? What about this game? They were like, oh yeah, that was a fun game. Oh yeah, I liked that one. I played it. Oh yeah, that was a good one too. Oh yeah, that was a good game. Baldur's Gate 3. Oh yeah, that was fantastic game. Wow, I love it so much. Tears of the Kingdom. Oh yeah, man, I played the crap. Oh yeah, that was a great game. Jedi Survivor. Oh yeah, man, I love that game. Like people just kept throwing games at them, and they were like, oh yeah, that was a good one. I forgot about that one. And it's like, why did you even post this? You know what I mean? It's just insane, D. And even the argument of, I mean, maybe you would agree with this, because one of the things they talked about is like, well, when you paid $60 in 2010, you got a full experience. They're like, you weren't getting day one patches, you weren't getting, battle passes, you were getting the whole game. They're like, now you pay $70 and you get like half of a game, and then you have to pay more money for the rest. Do you agree with that?
No. The problem is that, like, yes, games are more open-ended now, and sometimes they handle that really badly. Like, they have cliffhangers, they leave things open for, like, future, like, DLC or whatever, or, like, season passes, seasonal content, because the seasonal model is now, like, pretty much a mainstay of the industry now, which is unfortunate, in my opinion, but it is what it is. And people have been proving that they're willing to pay for it. But the base experience that you get from most games still very much eclipses what you used to get.
Agreed.
In most cases. I mean, yeah.
I love to bring up that as a kid, I really loved to play the Spyro trilogy, the original Spyro trilogy. And I would have loved to be able to play more of it, right? Like if they were like, oh yeah, I guess there's a Spyro Battle Pass, and every few months where you can pay this, or even if they were like, oh yeah, pay us $20 and you get even we release a new world with a handful of levels. I would have loved that as a kid, but instead, I mean, honestly, it's a lot like these other single player games now. Like they're just done. And I know we're kind of outside of the like DLC era. It is very much season pass oriented now. And like it's usually a multiplayer experience, but like Skyrim had some pretty great DLCs. You know, I loved living in that world. I mean, Arkham City had some nice DLCs. You know, I remember that as well. I mean, honestly, I don't really remember. I just remember getting to go back and play the game. Oh, you beat this game? Guess what? If you pay a little bit more money, the game's not over.
And
that was really great.
As much as I criticize Destiny, and especially now, like they did consistently pump out more content. Whether it was worth the price point is like another question. But like every year doing a full new expansion, I mean, and ultimately I think the expansions were probably worth it most of the time. In terms of like how much content you got for the price of $50 or whatever. Right. Like the seasonal model that they did where it was $10 a season, like some of those seasons were like barely anything, you know?
Right.
But I feel like Fortnite does a great job of constantly iterating and introducing new content, you know? Like there are games that do it well. And Destiny was constantly bringing new content, even if it wasn't always enough, you know?
I think it's interesting to see people criticize Destiny about the amount of content. And I mean, I've just started playing World of Warcraft, so I don't really know. But I don't feel like people did that about World of Warcraft. And you even had to pay a subscription for that game.
Right.
Where people
subscription,
are like,
and you have to get the expansion, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah. Both of those things, yeah.
Which I find that to be honestly, really interesting.
When it comes down to it, you kind of did with Destiny as well. Like, for the seasonal passes, you know, I mean, like, you would basically have to pay, like, what is kind of like a subscription fee. $10 every 3 months, so, like, not a whole lot, but, yeah.
And you could even say that, you know, World of Warcraft is on PC, which has a culture of not paying versus console players who are more willing to pay for content. Right.
Well, and you could also say that World of Warcraft exists in a universe now that's got a ton of free-to-play MMOs as competition. Yeah. But
but still they can't
also,
unseat it. Right?
Yeah. But like they also, you know, can't quite compete there.
But as so this podcast will be out after the United States presidential election. And which is a weird thing to say. Maybe there will be clarity as to who won that election. But it's interesting of like just for me living in Japan, just starting to go offline. I can tell from across, like in my interactions with my American friends, like over texting or, you know, just in different like on social media and such, I can see that y'all are tense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's an egregious problem, and I'm not going to go too much into it. I'm not going to rant, I swear. But there's an egregious problem with a candidate saying that an election is only fair and free if they win 7 months before the election. Or years before the election, really, you know? And has been saying that for multiple elections at this point, too. Like, that's kind of a huge problem. To, like, be unwilling to concede defeat. Like, or even the possibility of defeat.
Yeah.
Like, my mom always tried to encourage us to be confident, but that's not confidence. That's narcissism. That's different.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But one of the other things, so that's, you know, recently dealing with, like, you know, people talking about video games that way, people talking about, like, I've just seen a lot of bad takes. But one of the things, we'll switch here to good takes. David and I are also, people may not know this, and Farmer too, though we don't talk, do you talk with Farmer about reading?
A little bit.
We are
not
avid
a whole
readers.
Lot, but a little bit, yeah.
I do not really talk with Farm about reading very much. We are avid readers, and we are, I would say we're pretty avid Brandon Sanderson fans. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree, yeah.
Anyone in here showing some love for the Cosmere. So there's an interesting thing here in that I feel like David has recently caught up more on the Cosmere stuff. But Sanderson books for me, I had 10, like the standalone novels, I had read a lot of them beforehand. Did you read The Emperor's Soul?
Yes.
God, I love that book, dude. I love that story.
Well, he's got that anthology now that has like a bunch of his novellas in it. And like, so like when I went through this time to kind of like catch up in preparation for his latest Stormlight Archive book coming December 6th, I think.
I know,
or
it's
something
soon,
like that.
man. It's coming soon.
I wanted to go through all the Cosmere stuff because I just reread the Dresden Files and I needed to read something to get my mind off the political tensions here.
I will probably read, the new book is called Winds of Truth. I will probably just go ahead and read it, but I really want to reread the third Stormlight Archive book. It's called Oathbringer. I've been calling it Oathbreaker for like 6 years or whatever. It's called Oathbringer. But I don't remember the book. I don't know what was going on in my life, but like I remember a handful of things from the book, but I don't remember all that much from the book. So like I remember a lot of the main points, but there's these moments I don't remember, right? So I want to go back and read it again. Because I have read Way of Kings 3 times, which is the first book. I read Words of Radiance twice. I read Oathbringer once, and I read Rhythm of War once. But I was really into Rhythm of War, and I actually read it alongside another friend. So that is still very fresh for me. I still remember Rhythm of War quite well. But I don't remember Oathbringer, so I kind of want to revisit. But it's interesting because, like, so Brandon Sanderson has, like, I think, like, the top 2 most funded Kickstarters of all time with, like, his secret projects and then, like, his tabletop game that came out. And it's just so fascinating because David and I, in Sanderson, he's got a huge YouTube channel. You know, he does, like, a weekly update every week where he talks about different stuff that he has his own, like, publishing company now, like Dragonsteel, right? And, like, they sell merch and they do all of, like, it's crazy. I saw a video of his booth at C2E2, which is like Chicago Comic-Con. And dude, that booth, that was awesome. That was crazy. Right? And it's interesting because he's such this huge powerhouse, but I don't think of him like that. And he does a podcast. Right. He does a podcast called Intentionally Blank with one of his friends, another author, Dan Wells. I like him a lot. I think he's very funny. But David and I found Sanderson because before Sanderson, we were very big Wheel of Time fans. Robert Jordan
still
fans.
Him. Yeah, still him.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, he passed. Right, he passed. Yeah. We were very big Robert Jordan fans. And and we were reading the Wheel of Time series together, which, for those of you who haven't read, David has read it many times. How many times have you read that now?
Up to book 10, probably like 6 or 7. Right. After book 10, I mean, like the number starts going down pretty fast.
This gets so hard. I have read up to Crossroads of Twilight, the 10th book. I have done that 3 times. I have read 10 through 14. I've read once. Man, like, because guys, okay, so it's a great story. Highly recommend. Despite hearing us say that, y'all should know there's a part where every Robert Jordan fan, they call it the slog.
Yeah,
it's real, right, D? It's a real thing.
It's just like, man, like, I mean, like, there's just so much that needs to be set up for like the end of that series, and unfortunately, a lot of that takes a lot of explanation.
I have a friend who's been reading through the Wheel of Time series for a while now, and she's on the same one who read Rhythm of War with me. She just finished Path of Daggers, which I think that's book 8, right?
Yeah, book 8, yeah.
And I was like, oh, that was a good one. And she was like, I don't know, it felt a little slow at certain points. I'm like, oh, don't worry.
No. Oh, no.
Oh, you're not there yet. The slog starts with Winter's Heart, book 9, right? Because like that, it really slows down, book 9 and 10 specifically. But my favorite character in the Wheel of Time is like the main character of book 9, Perrin, and so I really liked it. you know, despite it, despite them walking through the snow constantly. What is this? What is the slog? I just looked it up really quick. Yeah.
I mean, everyone I've talked to says around book 10. That's when it really gets going. It's crazy to think that the first book was written in 1990.
That's so before I was born.
I originally heard of The Wheel of Time.
I heard about it from Rob. Who did you hear about it from?
I think I heard about it from, I actually don't know. I don't know who I heard it from, but I know I was like 4 or 5 books in, and I was talking to my English teacher in high school, in my sophomore year of high school about it.
Oh, so this is before we met.
Yeah. And like, he was like super excited that I was reading it. And I was like, yeah, but like, I don't know.
Rob is a mutual friend that David and I have, and he lived with my family for a time. So just my family had a big house, and we would have people that we knew from church would live with us. They would rent from us. And Rob was a big fantasy fan, and he recommended The Wheel of Time to me. And I read the first book when I was like 13, pretty young. But then, I would talk about it with Rob, and I was reading through it, and I remember he was reading Crossroads, the 10th book, the slog book. It had just come. No. He was reading Crossroads because Knife of Dreams had just come out, the 11th book, which is the last book that Robert Jordan published, that he wrote himself, and before he died. And I remember talking with Susan about it and with you. But so all of this to say, the author of the Wheel of Time books was it a blood disease that he had? He got a very rare disease of some kind and died.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was pretty quick. Would you agree? I don't remember. I don't have dates in front of me, but I feel like it was pretty quick that he died. And I remember when I heard that he was sick and then Knife of Dreams came out, I remember thinking like, well, what's going to happen to the story? It sounds so bad. It's like the first time I heard that Paul Walker died in a car crash, I was like, well, what's going to happen with the 7 Fast and Furious movie? What are they going to do?
Yeah, like I hate that we do that, but also that I feel like that's a pretty human thing to do. Because it's like, wait, this person is impacting my life pretty significantly, and now they won't be, And so, like, to have that personal kind of like, wait, no, this does directly, like, this isn't just sad, but, like, this directly affects me. Like, I think that's a pretty normal thing to, like, focus on, even if it seems kind of, like, calloused, a little bit, or selfish. But, so he revealed in March 2006 that he had been diagnosed with a disease, and that with treatment that it would probably take about 4 years. But then he passed away.
I started reading, actually.
He passed away September 2007, so like literally like a year and a half later.
Oh my gosh!
Oh.
So this is going to be really a weird insight into my life, but 2007, September 2007, the easiest way to remember this for me is he passed away 2 months after the call Nashville, which was 777. Do you remember that? Ugh. If anyone knows what I'm talking, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. And if anyone knows what that is, that's what's up. That, by the way, the call Nashville, that was the first time I saw an iPhone in the wild.
That's kind of wild.
There.
Yeah. That's
I remember I saw a kid in the stadium using an iPhone, and I thought I could steal it. Yeah, check this out. iPhone was introduced June 29th, 2007. So it actually was like just 6 days after it had come out. I saw one in the wild.
That's kind of insane. But I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, the iPhone exploded pretty quick.
But Robert Jordan passed, and another mutual friend of ours, Susan, who has also passed recently, She was also a big Wheel of Time fan. It's so funny, right, that she was such a huge fantasy nerd.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
She gifted me the first Mistborn book.
That's so cool.
When it was all, well, you know what's funny? So Susan loved reading, and I actually finished the Mistborn trilogy before she did, because she read the first book, but like didn't get back to the trilogy, kind of a deal, right?
Right. Yeah.
And she gifted. It was after Sanderson. It was announced that Sanderson was going to finish the series. One day, I went back to the furnace in the office. This is the church Dave and I were going to, and there was a book in my mailbox. And there was just like a little note from Susan of like, oh, this is the first book from the guy who's replacing Robert Jordan. You know, let's see if it's any good. That's how I remember. And he was like kind of a nobody at the time. Like he had just done 2 books, right? Elantris and Mistborn.
Right.
And he got chosen to do that.
Which, I mean, I feel like Elantris was fairly well regarded, but like it was also like, you know, I mean, like a ton of fantasy authors. I mean, there's more authors obviously who never write a book or whatever, or like it never takes off, or it wasn't good, you know, objectively or whatever. But I feel like there's a decent number who like write like one good book and then just can't ever kind of like recapture that lightning in a bottle, you know?
Right. It's there. Well, Sanderson's actually talked about it of like, to really see how good an author is, you should read their second book.
That makes sense.
Because the first book,
I would agree with that,
is the one that they they really dreamed, right, and like wrote it and like pitched it and all of that stuff. Well, what about the second book? How's their second book? Well, it's just interesting. I remember I saw someone on Book TikTok, and someone was like, why don't you talk about Sanderson books? And they were like, I don't talk about Sanderson books because he's like a huge author and he doesn't need my help. Like, I want to talk about small indie authors. And it's just funny because I know I'm totally in the wrong for this, but I still think of him as kind of a small, not indie, sorry, but smaller author. I kind of think of him as a small author because that's what he was when we found him. Right.
Well, and to be honest, like everything I've seen about him, and just like the way that he interacts with fans, the way that he comports himself during interviews, or like even like, you know, like the YouTube videos I've seen, he kind of like comes across that way. He comes across as like a humble, just kind of like, you know, white nerd author. You know, I mean, like,
and then like he has, but it's insane. I mean, and for those listening, one of my twins is named from one of the characters from his books, Yasna.
She's so cool too.
Yeah, man, she's so cool.
Ooh, like, so I just finished Oathbringer, and she is super cool in that because that's when like she comes like yeah.
So like, oh god, I love her so. She's such a great character, and no, he's such a good author. And so I read the Mistborn trilogy. I actually read Warbreaker next, and then I read Elantris. And you know, so there's this interesting thing with the Cosmere. I see online people talk about like. And he even has a recommendation of like, if you want to get into the Cosmere, like where to start. But it's weird because for me, I just read his books as they were being released, right? It's like the MCU in a weird way. Of like, do you watch it in like release order or do you watch it in chronological order? And so I watched it in release order, but then when I introduced Chiho to the MCU, we watched it in chronological order. That was actually super cool. And it's interesting because for me, I've read it in release order, and I wonder what it would be like for someone to read it kind of chronologically, you know?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious actually now. I feel like I've done that a little bit with this latest reread. Mm-hmm. But like there's certain moments where it would be like you would have to like interrupt series. So like, I mean like,
right.
You would have to like read like one book of one series and then jump over to like another, you know. There's a couple of times where that happens, where there's stuff overlapping a little bit in terms of like the time that they take place. The one I think of
is the book Tress of the Emerald Sea is the book that Sanderson, if you want to read the Cosmere, he recommends you start with that book, Tress of the Emerald Sea. It is narrated by a character named Hoyd, who appears in all of the Cosmere books. And it's really weird. So one of our friends, who's in it, actually Caitlin Piccinini in a Nav, she's reading that book first because she wants to read the Cosmere. But here's the problem. The idea of reading that book first blows my mind. It's narrated by Hoyd, But Caitlin, she has no idea who Hoyt is. He's just the narrator. He's just this weird dude, this narrator. And I'm like, I have known Hoyt as a character literally for like almost 20 years. Like, right? Yeah. Like, it's just insane. And it's like the idea. So the way he was acting and the things he was saying to me impacted me very differently than I would imagine someone who just met him. Right? And so it's just crazy.
I'm kind of when you told me that book was narrated by him, I immediately like my interest in that book like rose quite a bit because like he's been such a mainstay of the series. He's been in a lot of ways like the main crossover part of a lot of the books of the series. You know, like I mean, there's been now rereading everything. Like there's tons of like little references and stuff, but he's definitely like the most obvious one. Like for most of them, I
think him and is it book 2 of the Stormlight series? Vasher and Vivenna are in it. Vasher is Kaladin's like trainer guy, and that one was pretty clear to me.
Actually,
book 3, that one was very clear to me. That I was like, oh my god, it's him! Like that's so cool. And like, what's crazy? He doesn't know why this stuff's moving around. Oh, so good.
So when I first started reading Sanderson, I had no idea that like there was a larger universe or whatever. And so I just liked like certain series. Like I really liked Mistborn. And then I started reading Stormlight Archive, you know, after finishing Wheel of Time. And like Stormlight Archive was really, really cool, you know. But I had no idea that there was crossover between the two because like the later Mistborn books hadn't come out yet, you know, the Wax and Wayne stuff. And like that's what really kind of like shows crossover. And there's not a ton of references with the exception of like Hoyt.
No, exactly.
But like there are a bunch of references in both those books to like Elantris or Warbreaker and stuff. But I didn't realize that those were things. Like I just figured they were one-off books. I was like, well, I mean, they're just single books or whatever, and I'm kind of into the series right now, and so I think I'll just wait for the next books of these completely isolated series, as I thought of them at the time and everything. And so, like, when I had, like, I held off so long on reading, I think I eventually broke down and read Elantris, which was great.
It's a good book. Like, I like that one quite a bit.
I didn't read Warbreaker for the longest time, because I thought it was just, like, a one-off book. And, like, you know, like, oh, seems like kind of a cool concept or whatever. Like, I mean, like, you know, having perfect, like, color perception and, like, tone perception and all that. But, like, that's all I really knew about it. And that was just from osmosis of you talking about it a little bit, you know? Right. And, like, so I had no idea that any of this was all connected into, like, an MCU type, like, a vast undertaking of being in the same universe. And, like, oh my gosh, there's so much that, like, actually corresponds in terms of, like, character crossover and stuff. But, yeah, like, I had no idea Vasher and Vivenna were from Warbreaker first time that I read Oathbringer. I had no idea. Yeah. I mean, because they go under different names there, you know? And
they go under different
names.
Like,
yeah.
And, like, it's like, oh, her Shardblade doesn't dismiss, but it's like, it's not a Shardblade.
Yeah.
That's I mean, that's an interesting thing with Warbreaker. A lot of the stuff that crosses out of the book isn't stuff they really explored all that much, right? Of like awakening metal and awakening stuff. I mean, obviously there's Nightblood, but like that's it, right?
Right.
Which Nightblood also is in he's like the big one, right? Nightblood is in Roshar now. But it's super interesting. So I was looking into it. Apparently, the reason that the Cosmere was so low key for so long was because people wouldn't do it. Like publishers wouldn't pick up on it. And so he like kind of seeded the books with his idea of like, okay, well, like they're not going to let me do this, but like I'm going to kind of do it anyway and make it all like make these little references and make it all this thing. And then it is all connected, and then now like they're into it because everyone's into it.
But
right,
so like that's the best way to do it, though. Too like he might have been forced into doing it that way. But like you look at like for instance like the MCU compared to like the DC extended universe and all that, and the MCU with like slight crossover stuff and like just like familiar like names or places or whatever, and like Nick Fury eventually coming into the fold or whatever, and like you hear about certain events and stuff. Like, I mean, like the slow buildup of realizing, oh, this is one universe just feels more natural. It really does. And so I think the Cosmere actually does that really well, where like it builds up to more significant crossover. And like if you know what to look for, or like, you have some familiarity, you will spot things. But it's not necessarily like necessary to like, engage with that world.
With some of these worlds, I wonder what is going to come of it, because it's like Hoyd's been there, right? So like maybe it will pop up somehow. So like Tress in the Emerald Sea, right? Seems unconnected, but who knows? Did you read Yumi and the Nightmare Painter yet?
No. The only one of the secret books or whatever that I've read is the Sunlit Man. Bro,
you got to read Tress. You got to Yumi the Nightmare Painter, also narrated by Hoyd. No spoilers. Yumi the Nightmare Painter, dude. I cried at the ending. Like, that's crazy. I at one point was talking with my wife about how like it's weird because sometimes I want to cry, right, as like some kind of release, and I find that I can't, and I'm kind of sad about it. You know what I mean? Like, of just like, I don't know, like sometimes like I just can't do it. I cried reading that book, bro, at the end. It was so masterfully done. Sanderson, I feel like a lot of Sanderson books are similar. Maybe it's just all books in general, but with Sanderson, I've come to recognize this pattern. He does all of his books are the same. They start off and he just throws you in, right? You're like, I don't know what's going on. Sometimes the character doesn't know what's going on, so that's helpful because like you can get exposition from people explaining things. But like he just throws you in and then you start to learn. But I don't know how to describe it other than pressure keeps building up until I would say like the beginning of the third act.
Right. Yeah.
And everything builds up, and you can see usually, especially if there's multiple characters and stuff like that, he gets you every time because whatever it is in that story that's coming, he doesn't surprise people all that much. You know it's coming, but he still so masterfully does it that you're still just so impressed with it. The example I think of, and spoiler for like a 10-year-old book, when Kaladin and Dalinar meet in the Way of Kings, it's this whole, right, like where Dalinar, they're stuck on the plateau and the bridgemen come and save them and stuff. Like, dude, I'm getting goosebumps just remembering.
Yeah.
Right? Just remembering it. It's just like,
yeah.
And it always happens, and then the end of it, like there's this climax moment, and then there's like the end of the book where he like ties up a bunch of stuff, right? It's like Game of Thrones always having the big battle in episode 9, and then episode 10 is like, prepping for the next season kind of a deal.
Yeah.
But he does so good. And then, I mean, he does subvert. I feel like Oathbringer was a subversion to some of his stuff. There were moments that you're like, oh my gosh, is this happening? And then it's like, no, it's not happening. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of a deal.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, like, also though, like, I don't feel like anything that he does is like super, super, super innovative. It's just really, really, really masterfully well done.
Just well done,
right? Like, I've always said, like, there's two things that I really like. It's like when something's extremely well done, like so much so that like it's head and shoulders above everything else because it stands out that much. Or if something's super innovative. And I feel like the innovative part of his books is generally just in, like, having all these, like, intricate magic systems and all that are different, And, like, also, like, having this meta universe or whatever. But in terms of the stories he tells, I feel like there's a lot of tropes in there, but that they're just so well done that it doesn't matter that they're tropes, right? It's like when someone says a cliche, but they say it so genuinely and so authentically that it's not really a cliche, Right. You can tell, like, it's heartfelt and it still stirs you or whatever. Like, that's, I feel like, kind of like Sanderson's storytelling.
Well, people will often say, like, oh, well, it's a trope for a reason. I'm like, no. It's like, it transcends even that saying.
Right.
Like, exactly like you said. You see where it's going, and yet when you get there, you are happy about it. You know, you're like,
right.
well done. Well done. Well, I mean, how stupid would Lord of the Rings be if they don't destroy the ring at the end, right? Like it would, like you just expect or like Avatar: The Last Airbender. What if Aang gets killed by the Fire Lord in the last battle, right? Because they're like, oh, subvert expectations, guys. No, like, you know what that story is, right? They lay it out for you. And like, it's Journey Before Destination, bro.
Yeah.
Journey
man.
Before Destination.
Every single time that there's like words said, you know,
Oh,
or like specific actions taken by protagonists, like it hits. And it's like, okay, like I knew this was coming. Like obvious, like there's a couple plot points that get subverted, right? Like in Mistborn, there's one big one, and it's like, whoa, okay, that's kind of wild, you know? Didn't expect that, you know? Or like there's like I feel like all of his books have like certain plot points that you weren't necessarily expecting. But like overall, like I mean, like it's like a storm, and I think he's even described his writing this way, where like like the Sanderson storm of like the third act, where everything's built to a crescendo, and then like and everything speeds up, and everything's like going like kind of like convalescing into this like wild, like everything's connecting, everything's like really colliding.
You're getting goosebumps. And he says something that's a cliche, but it's not a cliche. Like this. I'm going to say something that's going to give David goosebumps. You guys ready? If you read Sanderson, you're going to get goosebumps. Say the words. Say the words. Oh my God. So important. It's like I think we've talked about on the podcast, like, it doesn't matter. I always get goosebumps when someone's like, run, Barry. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Run, Barry. Run. And you're like, oh man, it's going down. Oh, it's happening. Yeah, run, bro. Yeah, say the words. What a great, The Knight's Radiant.
But
cool.
But like, his books are basically like a storm. Like you hear the winds blowing, you see the lightning start to amp up. You see the clouds get darker and everything, and then you know that there's going to be sunshine at the end in some way, shape, or form. Like all of this, but it still hits. It still like impacts.
It's still an experience.
It's like
right? Oh, so good. So good. I am very excited. So right now on my reading list, so the way that I get through my reading list is I have a goal for like 20 minutes a day. I try to read 20 minutes a day, which isn't that long, and I often will read more, but like that's my goal, right? And right now I've been going through the Expanse series and the Witcher series, but I'm gonna definitely just read Winds and Truth when it comes out. It's going to the front. I'm not putting that on the back of the list. I'm putting it at the front of the list. Right now I'm reading a book by an author named Mackenzie Catron. It's called Goblin of the Glade, I think it's called. And it's like kind of like this dark fantasy book. It's all right. I haven't gotten too far into it yet. But so good. Well, D, we've had a very literary episode. Is there anything you would like to comment before we wrap up?
Oh, how did you like Sunlit Man?
So
I don't think I've asked you that yet.
It's interesting. Now, this podcast's not even close to being done now. This is going to sound crazy. So Brandon Sanderson is for sure, I would probably say, my favorite author. As far as like clearly the amount of his work that I've read, and I really love his stuff, right? Would it surprise you for me to say, when I am usually not into any of his books at the beginning, all of them, when I start them, it's that beginning. Like, he always just drops you in, and I'm always like, I don't understand why I'm supposed to care about this. Like, okay, who is this guy? What is going on? Dude.
Yeah, it kind of felt a little bit weird, like starting his Stormlight Archive or whatever. Starting some of his books and then like going to finishing Wheel of Time. It was like, well, this is like a very different style, because like Jordan kind of like starts you off small and makes you care about like the main character or whatever, and then it introduces you to the world through his eyes at first. And then it starts to get larger and larger, and Sanderson just kind of throws you in the world, and like, good luck.
Introduces you to the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. As opposed to like,
Sunlit Man, there's another person I know who lives close to me who just read Sunlit Man. So it was you and her who were recommending it to me. And I started reading it and I was like, okay, like I don't get, okay, like I thought the references to the other Cosmere stuff was interesting, like breath units, for his machine or whatever. And also, I think it's really cool that on the scale of like how invested you are, the top of the scale is the Elantrians.
Yeah.
But it's like, but it makes sense with their powers, but it's also his first book, right? Which is really cool of like his first book's people that among everyone, they have the most investiture and most power, but it makes sense when you read Elantris and what they can do. Like, I mean, they don't need anything, right? They just draw with their finger and it happens.
Right.
But in the same way, dude, they got me, man. Like when God, I don't even remember the Spren's exact. When the Spren's like, there's one thing you can do to save these people.
Yeah.
Bro, my heart, dude, so good. The world reminded me of. I think we talked about. No, maybe we didn't talk. It reminded me of Crematoria from the Chronicles of Riddick. Of
sure.
The planet's too hot to be on, so you can. But for that planet in the Chronicles of Riddick, it's a prison that's underground, right? And it's like, and the whole point is that you can't escape the prison because even if you escape the prison, like you'll burn alive in the planet or you'll freeze to death. Like you can only live in like that twilight space, which is like moving so quickly, right? So on one hand, you're like, wow, Johnny, so like this planet reminds you of that, so it's not that creative. You don't love it. No, the problem is that I loved that planet. And I loved that concept. So I was totally about it. Yeah, it was really cool.
In the way that he explores it too, with like the planting and everything, and like the technology and everything. Like, I mean, like there's just a lot of cool units of like, and especially like, man, that is absolutely novel that you kind of have to read after you've like experienced a decent part of the Cosmere, because there's just so many direct references. Like there's
Skadrians there, and they're in a spaceship, and then they're like, "Oh, you're a Rosharian. You want to work for us? You like we could hire you." And then he's like, "What do you got?" And he's like, "Well, I have a like, yeah."
But dude, even, also like learning that who the main character is and stuff, and like, oh my gosh, like there's just I'm getting chills. I
got chills when he summoned his blade in the ship. And
the
Skadrians are looking at it, and it's just like. They've never seen a shard blade before. They've heard about it, but they've never seen one, right? Because even still, like, but then like even them using, like, what is like metal? What is allomancy? They used allomancy on him, and he had to take off his metal. Like it's just like, oh my gosh, like the crossing over, right? Because I love Mistborn. I almost got a tattoo. David and I almost got matching Mistborn tattoos. I don't think people realize this. I almost got the symbol of the Rioter tattoo, and David almost got the symbol of the Soother tattoo. We were going back and forth about it, you guys. Like that's how much we like this thing. And so like, so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Mistborn is usually the book that I buy for other people to introduce them to the Cosmere. It's just like, because it's just such a good, like, open and shut kind of like, experience.
The first one, especially.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I usually do Warbreaker. That's the one I do.
Warbreaker's a pretty good choice. Yeah.
Light Song is one of my favorite Sanderson characters, just period.
Such a cool character,
him so much. And
like the sentient swords too is just like a really cool element and stuff too. And then the power is really unique. Like, I mean, I don't know, but like, man, like, talking all this Sanderson makes me really wish there were like Sanderson games, because I feel like all his power systems would work so well. I feel like in that medium, they all have like limitations and like ways that they like exist and everything. That like I feel like it would be
very well
like,
explained.
Yeah.
Well, Sanderson has like the Sanderson laws of magic, right? And it's that you're only allowed to use the magic to solve problems in proportion with what the people know of how it works. So you can use magic to solve the problem, but they have to know what its limitations are, right? And I didn't realize this. Sanderson is the one who coined soft magic and hard magic.
Really?
Like that's
I did not know
that's
that.
him. Yeah, that's his
wild.
explanations of like soft magic systems and hard magic systems and when you should use them. One of the things that he said that I love, and I apply this to like all narratives now, even like movies and stuff, is he was like, a twist feels more satisfying, or like a reveal, if the audience feels like they could have predicted it. He's like, it doesn't matter whether or not it's actually possible that they could have predicted it, but they have to feel like they could have. So like there is a surprising twist in the first, not in the first, in the third Mistborn book that goes back all 3 books. And if you go back to the first book, the seeds are there that, like, if you were paying attention, which why would you be paying attention to that, right? Like, there's no reason for you to be paying attention to it. If you were paying attention, you could have called it. But because he did stuff like that, those twists just hit so hard that you're like, oh, wow, it was right in front of me the whole time. And I didn't see, like, the actual words were on the page. And I just didn't see it, you know? So good. But no, a Sanderson game, that would be what's up. I love Brandon Sanderson. But then, you know, I mean, I've named one of my children after one of his characters. This whole podcast has just been a Sanderson podcast. It's pretty wild following him on YouTube and seeing, like, compared to some of his other fans, it's almost like I don't even like him.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Like, that's some of the stuff that I've seen lately, and just trying to refresh my memory on certain, like, things, just because as I get older, my memory isn't necessarily as retentive as I wish it were.
The human mind is finite.
So Googling some things on Coppermind or whatever, you know, and all that. I'm sorry, using Bing to Coppermind and all that. Yeah. Like, there's been rabbit holes that I go down, and then there's just people like hardcore into like every single like word that he writes in a way that I just like. It's kind of like, you know, like, I think you and I both really like Firefly as a concept, as a series, all that stuff.
Sure.
But like that we would never necessarily like characterize ourselves as browncoats, you know?
Right. No,
because
never.
That's a whole different like
no, never.
That's a whole different element of fandom. That's a whole different tier of fan there. And I kind of feel the same with Sanderson, even though I feel like I very, 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 very much love his works and stuff, and think he's like easily one of the best writers that I've read.
But I have a giant Avatar back tattoo. This room I'm in is covered in Avatar paraphernalia, and my other twin daughter, her name is from The Legend of Korra. I've read all the books, I've watched all the media, I have the graphic novels, and I still feel that way too, even in that fandom. Where like some people, it's just like...
it's just wild, yeah.
A huge thing for them, and it's fine, but like it's interesting. It's just interesting of like, wow, like I thought I really loved this, and then you meet someone who loves it so much more than you. I mean, we can do that with everything. Taylor Swift. I'm a Swiftie. Bro, I've met some...
yeah.
Apparently, I don't even know that I'm considered a Swiftie by some of these people, right? Like, it's pretty wild. But before we end, I do want to talk about, or just touch on that there was that article. Was it a Wired article that was written about Sanderson?
Oh, yeah.
And the dude was really mean.
He really kind of was, yeah. Like, I kind of really understood what he was going for. It was a really weird tone. Yeah.
Yeah, I understood what he was going for, but like, I guess just bringing it up, I just totally all I want to say is I totally disagree with that article. People can go and read it, but like, he was just kind of mean about it and such. And Sanderson's great. I disagree.
I think the name of it is Brandon Sanderson is Your God or something like that. Like, but it seems to be paywalled now, and it wasn't at the time that I read it. But it's just wild to like describe, like, you know, someone so harshly when you're not necessarily qualified to make that like distinction, right?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, you can always backseat quarterback like anything, but yeah.
Agreed. and dude's wrong. Go read some Brandon. Okay, so go read some Brandon Sanderson book. Make sure to like and subscribe and do all those things on that note. And we will catch you guys next week. And maybe Farmer will be here. Maybe he won't.
We'll only know like probably about 30 minutes before the cast. So.
Yeah, that's very true. Well,